Priory Hall remained one of the big stories of 2012. But what will be the big stories in 2013 affecting your home or your wallet? Well, personal finance expert Karl Deeter from advisors.ie joins us now to tell us more. Good morning to you, Karl.
Hey, good morning.
Your heart just goes out to the residents there of Priory Hall, and I'm hoping that at least they will be exempt from next year's property tax, considering they're not even in their homes, or will they?
Well, there's a waiver for ghost estates, but a ghost estate normally is an unfinished estate. In the case of Priory Hall, I don't actually know, but I would imagine they'll probably be on the waiver list. But technically, it's not a ghost estate because it was completed, mortgages were drawn down.
Well,
at one stage, it had full occupancy. So I think that there certainly would, if they're not getting a waiver, be a strong case there for saying you shouldn't tax a home that someone can't legally live in for health and safety reasons.
Of course not. You know, as we discovered, and they were all evacuated because it wasn't completed.
It is.
There was an awful lot wrong with it.
And as a matter of fact, one thing that isn't known is the amount of other properties out there that could have similar issues. Because the problem with Priory Hall wasn't one that you, I, or anybody else would spot. It was actually something hidden within the walls between floors. In Ireland, because of the weather, you typically build with two walls and a break between them for insulation. But a fire could get into that cavity wall and travel up through a building, and there wasn't adequate stops in place for that. But to see that, you'd literally have to open up the wall. You'd have to take out masonry work. You know, when you buy a house and you're wondering whether it's okay, you're looking for, you know, cracks in the ceilings or to make sure that all your sockets are screwed in. You're not, you know, drilling through walls and looking for that kind of thing. So I think that's just a great example of the tragedy of a building boom when things aren't done right. And because corners were cut, the architect in that instance hadn't been out to see it, but had still signed off on the job. And all these things that were meant to happen to make buildings safe and good for people, you just need small little failures like that, and the whole thing goes bang.
Well, it was the problem with self-regulation. That's what it boiled down to in the end.
It is, but at the same time, there is regulation out there. I mean, the people who grant planning, the planning departments, are the ones who are actually the official authority in this instance. But I know in Dublin, I think they have 3 or 4 of them for the city. I mean, how are they meant to get out and see every job with just 3 or 4 people going around? And so for those people, 2013 is going to be another year where it's financially difficult for them. And that's before we talk about the general financial things that we're discussing today. Things like...
Well, move on to those. I mean, what's in store for the rest of us in 2013?
I think some of the big trends in 2013 to watch out for is what's going to happen with pricing, for instance, in banks. There's going to be a big shift towards deposit prices coming down, which means you'll get less and less by putting money into a savings plan or, you know, a standard.
The rate has been good this year.
Yeah, but it's going to come down below 2%. And at the same time, deposit interest retention tax, which is the tax you pay on interest in bank accounts, has gone up by 10%. And from next year, or 2014, they'll be putting PRSI on that. So you'll be paying what is almost similar to the marginal rate of tax on deposits. So one of the things that people can do to protect themselves from that is get out of banks. Don't put your money with people who don't give you a return. Look at the NTMA, look at On Post. You'll get massive returns there versus what the banks will get. And I know this is a real bugbear with the banks because they're crying their eyes out every week, you know, leaking stories to the press saying, oh, this is bad pricing, the state shouldn't be outpricing the banks. You know, the state didn't need 65 billion, you know, pumped into that. Well, actually, sorry, in truth, we needed more because we got a bailout. But, you know, by the rationale of it, though, we had a lot of banks that needed to be saved, and they used to pay more than the state did on savings, and no one ever complained about that. So when you hear banks start crying about it, you know that there's something there that really worries them. But use it to your advantage. Get a higher return. Look at NTMA, statesavings.ie, On Post. You get a far better return on your money.
Or what's going on with the post office?
The post office is going through a big revamp. As a matter of fact, a lot of people are saying that the post offices will probably take over from where bank branches used to be in the past, that you'll be able to make lots of payments there, but the trend is for branches to close. Within the post office itself, its savings plan are great. Like they have one that's a 3-year savings plan, you get 10% back, tax-free. To get the equivalent elsewhere, you'd have to be making, you know, about 13% after 3 years, after, you know, when the tax comes off that, it'd bring you back down towards 10, and you're simply not going to get that. You know, you're not going to go out and get 4% a year in any bank. So I again would say that state savings is a really positive option for people because the trend next year is for that pricing and deposits to come down. And you'll need to protect yourself financially because other things are going to happen too, like energy prices. You know, we didn't have excise on fuel, but they put a carbon tax on of €10 a tonne. That's going to feed through to fuel prices. Everybody's familiar with the fact that their energy bills are going up, and yet we're not getting any richer. So we have a classic kind of, it's what's called stagflation, a stagnant economy with inflation, but all of our inflation is happening in energy and food, and almost everything else is costing less. You know, I bought a suit like this one 8 years ago and paid more for it than I did last year. And that's because the general trend is for prices to come down. And in part that's because we keep making more and more money all the time, and it gets reflected in energy, but it doesn't get reflected in the real economy necessarily. So we've got this interesting mix of deflation in a lot of things that we buy, and inflation in a lot of the things that we need.
Like car tax, I mean, that's going up next year as well.
Yeah, and they very smartly, from their point of view, I'm not saying that I think it was a good way of doing it, hit all of the low bands, because there's been a big trend towards getting the lower taxed cars. So what do? We raise the tax on those. So it seems that there's like wealth destruction just around the corner at any stage, because our public finances are in such bad shape that they're going to take from you any way they can. And that's one of the things I try and tell people, is that you've got to be defensive in your finances, both in what you invest in, but also in what you do. Because if you're not looking at ways to pay the minimum amount of taxes, if you're not claiming back everything that you can, then really what you're doing is making yourself less well off voluntarily. And if you choose not to do anything about it, that's still a choice. You can choose not to do anything. Lots of people do. I'd say 9 out of 10 people choose to just let it roll.
Well, Karl, can we end on a good note? As it's Christmas week, is there anything good going to be coming down the tracks next year?
Well, as it's Christmas week, Christmas is coming, and that's the good news for now. I'll have to wait and see what 2013 brings. What I would say is that people need to remember, you know, the good times didn't last forever, we know that. And I'm telling you, hand on heart, the bad times won't either. Sometimes it can seem like it goes on forever, but we might be on the ropes now. We're going to come back. We're bound to. If you look at the kids that we're bringing through in the schools and the colleges, the things they're inventing, their talent, their ability, I fully trust that they're going to be an engine of recovery, and you can count on them. So I think, you know, we just keep going, keep swinging. One day you'll hit something, and, you know, prosper. It's just hard work at the moment.
I think he was listening to Whitney Houston on the way out this morning. I believe the children are the future. Teach them well and let
Will you be my bodyguard, Martin? You could be my Kevin Costner.
Merry Christmas to you.
Thank you.
And thanks for coming in.
Thanks so much, Karl.
Now, why has the robin become the Christmas garden bird in Ireland? And